Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to another Thriving Talent LinkedIn Live. My name is Natalie Wilkins, and I'm the co-CEO of Thriving Talent. And I'm here today to talk to you about how to use e-learning to create lasting culture change inside of your organization, especially when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. So please drop a line in the chat if you're here with me live. Where are you dialing in from? Which country? What's your role? What are you here to learn? I'd love to hear from you. And I also, in these LinkedIn Lives, I also invite you to ask your questions or bring your own perspectives into this conversation. So one of the things I want to start by sharing is just to paint the context of why are we running a LinkedIn Live today on this topic. And there's a few key points that I want to share and to remind us about as to why looking at this topic is really important. And the first one is, and it won't be a surprise, I think, to many of you, especially with some of the global things happening inside the diversity, equity, inclusion space this year, is that the diversity, equity, inclusion fatigue is real, and it's being positioned and influenced by many different factors. And just to bring this to life, I want to share a story about a conversation that I had the other week with a line manager. We were running some trainings, and during the coffee break, she came to me and shared that she'd done 4 diversity, equity, inclusion trainings this year so far. So she's already an active ally. She's interested in this topic. And she's still quite new to this topic, and she wasn't concretely clear around what she should do differently following these trainings, because there wasn't any information coming after beyond the trainings that clarified what those actions, what those behaviors were meant to be from her side. And that's really concerning, because attending webinars, attending trainings such as this becomes performative. We call it performative learning in the space of learning and development. So people are really looking for clarity and progress of what they're meant to be doing. And so that really concerns me when I hear feedback like that from line managers. And we really want to make sure that whatever you're offering to your employees, whether it's webinars, e-learning, in-person training, whatever it is, it really needs to really help you create that long-lasting culture change in your organizations, rather than it just being a tick box. And that's my other concern, is I hear a lot about this tick box exercise, running a 1.5 day unconscious bias training for all your employees so that you really scale it and maximize in that one particular event. 6 months later, what's changed? What's happening? What are they doing? How is this impacting the organization at a cultural or a performance or even financial level? How are you measuring the impact of these one-off trainings? And when there is no follow-up and no reinforcement, it's a little bit like giving someone a piano lesson and then expecting a concert in 6 months. So you really have to be thinking about the long term and having a journey mapped out as to how you want this to impact your organization. And when you're thinking about designing trainings or a training program on any topic, but especially one which impacts culture like diversity, equity, and inclusion, you've got to have clear behavioral targets. And I see so many companies not having any clear behavioral targets. In one organization, I remember a senior leader telling me, we value inclusion, we value belonging. That's a beautiful sentiment, and it seemed that they believed that and they meant it. But when I asked the manager and the wider team, well, what does that mean concretely? One person said not being a jerk, another said liking diversity. There just wasn't any consistency. So if you don't have a shared language, if you're not sharing with people what the aim is in terms of behavioral targets beyond the training, if there's no actionable behaviors beyond the training, and if people can't describe it, then they're not going to be able to do it. And waiting around for this big program where you're going to delay everything until the senior leadership team are ready, is never really going to materialize because there's so many burning priorities going on inside of organizations right now. So sometimes just letting teams and departments take their own initiative to get this journey started is this the best way to go. For example, I know of a team who'd been waiting around for the organization to offer something, and they got frustrated. So they took it on their own initiative and they piloted an inclusive meeting practice training. So they trained themselves and the team around them. This was pretty big team, about 25 people, on inclusive meeting practices. And they then saw measurable improvement in team trust. So 6 months later, because some they had a learning journey mapped out beyond the training to really keep a track of how this was impacting the team, and they ran a team survey to measure trust. This really saw an impact 6 months later. So it didn't need a global strategy, it just needed a team to take action. And you're going to hear me talk about this a lot, but it really does count when you can measure the impact of the training investments that you're making. Any professional learning and development or talent management professional in your organization will tell you that it's very important to link impact measurements so that you can not only measure the value or the return of investment for the organization, but it also helps you to secure those resources and those budgets going forward for future training. So, if I think back, I reviewed a client's onboarding materials a few months ago. And when I was running this audit, this assessment for the organization, I noticed that there was a 3-minute diversity video that people got around week 2, week 3. But meanwhile, this was a sales organization. Their sales playbook was about 60 pages long during this onboarding period of 6 weeks. That can often tell new hires what matters, where the organization is placing focus, and what doesn't. And just thinking about that, for example, it's also about an indirect impact of, we're onboarding people, we're giving them some training, but it's 3 minutes long. It sends a really clear message about what's important, what isn't, and it will have an impact on what is expected of them beyond the onboarding period. So remember, inclusion isn't a side dish. It really has to be part of the main recipe if you want to see tangible impact and changes in your cultural environment within the organization. So saying all of this, I want to recap with you and remind you and refresh you on how you can make diversity and equity and inclusion stick, because we really need to treat this as any other strategic competency within your business. And we're going to look at what does it take to create well-designed, scalable learning journeys that has some clear measurements at the end of it. And in that, I do want to talk about e-learning and how it can help as part of that bigger recipe, especially when it's done right. So one of the things I want to share with you is a model that we created at Thriving Talent to help frame this conversation, this bigger strategic approach to learning and development around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because to make this real and to have impact, it really is about having a clear model and having clear language. So not only can you map your learning interventions against these, but you can set some expectations about the actionable behavior you're expecting when people go through these trainings, and then thinking about how you're going to measure this in the business. So as you can see here, this is a summary of our diversity, equity, inclusion competency model. And the competencies are organized into 3 categories. There's me, we, and us. So within myself, so things that I'm responsible as an individual contributor, whether I'm the CEO or the intern, this is stuff that anyone can do within their role. And then there's a set of competencies, 5 of them within my team. Some of these are more applicable to team leaders, to supervisors, to managers, to directors, to people leading teams, but it's also about how you show up within your team and your interactions with your colleagues and other team members. And then you've got a set of competencies within my organization. And this is really looking at the system and how you can influence the system within the organization. So these are the three layers or levels of competencies that we map the rest around. Because if you don't have a set of clear language or expectations about what you're looking to shift and what you want to communicate to people, it can get really lost amongst many other things within the organization. Now, the good news is that you don't need to have a standalone competency model on DEI. If you already have a competency model embedded in your organization and it's well known, then don't muddy the waters and bring in other language and confuse everyone. It might be an opportunity for you to take that model, compare it to this one, and see how can you refresh the existing model, or where do you need to add some things that might be obviously missing, so that, again, it's an opportunity to enhance rather than replace or create confusion. And this model is practical because you're showing how inclusion starts at the individual level and how it can scale through the different layers of the organization within teams and within wider structures. And going back to e-learning plays a key role by giving people the language, the confidence, and some theory, some tools around how they can progress through these levels, so that you can essentially try to create some cost efficiencies and scalability across your organization. You should consider deep diving into some of these e-learning topics that you might offer people by offering them some short trainings or longer trainings, depending on the competency and the complexity of the competency, so that there's an opportunity for them to practice and have that social learning opportunity with other colleagues, bringing in the context and the scenarios from the business. But you shouldn't just go with one or the other. Often I find the most effective learning journeys are building blocks of different learning opportunities. So some might be self-led, self-paced, but others might be social, interactive, and experiential. And so if we look at the next page of this presentation, so just give me 1 minute so we can go across. When you think about these competencies, it's important to think about the developmental stages, okay? It's not just a one and done, I have this or I don't have it. It's not binary. There's skill levels. So you can see here there's developmental stages from 1 to 6. Ready means, you've got conscious incompetence. You know that this is an issue. You know that there's something that you need to change, for example, in your behavior. 2 is that you've gone out to seek the knowledge, but it's knowledge alone. So you understand what you could be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. Level 3 is being able to apply that knowledge conceptually, maybe performing tentatively. 4 is performing, so performing confidently. 5 is that you have that confidence and competence now to coach and support other people. And level 6 is actually leading and transforming. So taking that competency, creating initiatives, changing systems in the organization because of that skill level. So that's, if any competency, not just related to the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, it needs to be broken down into stages. It might not be 6 stages, it might be 3, it might be 4, it might be 5. But it's important to show how people can graduate. And if you think about it, everything from level 1 and 2 is really helping people understand the what and the why. And then the training interventions from 3 to 6 are allowing individuals to grow, which is the how. So I hope this is making sense. So I want to give this some illustrative context because it's important to see how people can graduate. Now, within myself was that range of competencies which are intrapersonal to myself. So, for example, and you can see here, these are the levels, so levels 1 to 6 listed vertically. If I just realized I was always interrupting women in meetings and I've never noticed before, then I'm ready. It's something that I've noticed and that I'm not doing well, or I'm doing something that's causing potential harm, or it's creating negative consequences for other people, in this case, women in the meetings. So I'm ready. So then I seek to understand this. So I've learnt about interrupting bias and I want to change it. I'm ready to change it. So the understand might be covered by an e-learning because it helps us understand why these biases are occurring, the situations, for example, meetings in which they're occurring and the impact that has on other people. And I've probably picked up a few tools from the e-learning on how to interrupt it, and I'm ready to apply it. So then I graduate to respond. So in that situation now, I'm putting it to practice in real scenarios and I'm keeping a tally. I'm taking account during meetings to make sure that I'm not dominating airtime or interrupting people. So I'm building self-awareness. And so I'm applying that, and over weeks, maybe months, I might do another training, or there might be something from the e-learning I want to apply now and to perform at an even higher level. So in this case, I might be proactively creating space for others to contribute. So I'm not just keeping an eye on myself now, but I'm actively bringing other people, other voices into those meetings that might not naturally get the airtime. And then maybe a year down the line, I'm feeling so confident with my competency now that I'm willing to coach and support others more actively. So I'm either calling it out when others interrupt. Again, this could have been from the e-learning. There's some tools or tips on this, or I may have gone to another training, or I might have read something about it. So I'm applying more skills here, more tools, and I am actively role modeling better behaviors. And then eventually I could lead and transform where maybe I'm introducing inclusive meeting guidelines across my team or my function. So this is just to bring to life how, when you start to pay attention to the way people can graduate at that developmental stage, it can really influence the culture of the organization, the way people show up and behave day to day. I'll give you another example when it comes to the other competency grouping within my team. So within my team, it could be from, I noticed some team members never speak up in these meetings, and I feel awkward about it. And then step by step, you can see that I'm learning, I'm applying, I'm practicing, I'm improving, I'm gaining confidence, all the way to level 6 eventually, if I want, where I could be embedding inclusive feedback and development practices into our team leader onboarding. Or maybe influencing the department who's responsible for that to do that. But you can see how this, when paying attention to it and helping people understand the levels that they can graduate to, is helping them. So having said all that, how does this then how do we get e-learning, for example, to help people graduate? So as I said already, it's not just depending on e-learning by itself, it's part of a bigger recipe. And often when you're thinking about the competencies that you might want to change in the organization, it's really thinking through your audience, because the recipe might be slightly different depending on the level and seniority of the person, the audience, the learning audience that you want to promote this to. But it's also putting in different learning experiences so that you're not just relying on one tool. And for any of you that you might be aware of, in learning and development, there's something called learning styles or adult learning styles. It applies to children too, but in adult learning principles, there's learning styles, and we have preferences in the way in which we learn. And some of us can have a very strong preference to one type of style, and some of us might have a blend of different styles. So we're talking about theoretical learning. Some people really like to read, to study things in detail, to know the topic inside and out, and so they approach the topic first from a theoretical point of view. Some people are very practical, or they practice what's the topic that, or the skill that they want to improve in. Some like to be reflective, which really links to social learning. So they need to have other people and reflect openly with other people about what they're learning. And sometimes it's a blend of all those different things. Some people just like to jump into the deep end, maybe make some mistakes along the way and get practical. But you need to consider all these different learning preferences in your mix, in your recipe, and then think about the right order in which to present these different learning offers so that people can come in at the point where they feel comfortable, which speaks to their learning style. And then also give them nudges and opportunities to follow up so that it's not a one and done, a tick box, but something that continues that they can apply and improve on over time. And it's really important when you're thinking about this mix for your different audiences to not overload them. You're not looking to boil the sea when you're designing these learning programs. It's really thinking about what topic and what approach makes sense right now inside the bigger picture of the organization in terms of our broader business objectives, what could help us achieve those objectives looking at this particular topic that we want to make some influence on. So if you are in the market for shopping and buying e-learning into your organization, or even maybe creating e-learning if you have the resources to do that, um, it's a really great way to reach many, many people, and you can design it in a way that it speaks to different audiences. Because as we know, training budgets, DEI budgets are not growing. We're in a very tight market right now where a lot of companies are making cuts, hiring freezes, budget freezes. So e-learning could be one of the most scalable and cost-effective ways for you to build and develop inclusive behaviors across the entire organization, especially when you're working with dispersed and hybrid teams, especially if your teams are scattered around the country or around different regions in the world. And the other benefit of e-learning is it meets learners where they are in terms of time zone, in terms of time availability. So it's also something you can easily plug and play into onboarding processes, helping you fast track those, setting those expectations around behaviors with new people coming to the organization. The other benefit about e-learning is that you can make it really bite-sized, and you can put a focus on behaviors. So for example, when we design our DEI modules, we really aim to make them short, focused on one or two topics, no more, and very practical so that you bring in real scenarios from the business so that they can instantly see how the theory applies in practice and hopefully feel more confident to go and put that into practice once they've completed the e-learning. So don't aim for any more than 60 minutes max. I would aim for 30 minutes is the sweet spot, because that time isn't too pressing for people and they can easily find the time. But it also allows you to cover enough of the topic and make it practical for it to be a rich, valuable learning experience for your learners. The other thing I mentioned also earlier, but I just want to go into a few more details on is, you need to think about flexibility and personalization. And this is a hot topic in the space of learning and development in general, because you can't assume a one-size-fits-all approach to every single learner in your organization. And you also need to be flexible and personalized, as I said, in terms of the timing and the pacing of how you roll things out. So if you think about your DEI maturity, if you know what it is in terms of how mature your organization is on this topic, then you can really pick the right topics for your organization. You don't want to undershoot or overshoot. And like I said, it's important to align it with business priorities. So for example, if you've been on the DEI journey for the last 5 years, and maybe your focus has been mainly on one diversity demographic, let's say it's gender, and you're now ready to expand it into some other topic areas, then you might want to blend in different demographic topic areas to build awareness around different representations outside of gender. So it could be LGBTQ plus, it could be disability, could be neurodiversity. Pick the ones that make sense for your organization, where you think there'll be interest. And from a competency point of view, maybe active allyship or allyship in action is a good topic, because those are the behavioral skills that will help your people who are already showing interest in taking care of inclusion and belonging to take the next step to be active allies to different groups of representation. And it also gives you an opportunity in that topic to present some other topics such as intersectionality and how that influences different people's experiences at work and how to be more sensitive and in tune with that as an ally. So that's just an example. Whereas if you're maybe at the very beginning, you can cover some of the basics, such as unconscious bias, such as most companies, for example, at the beginning focus on recruitment and hiring in more diversity and making their process more inclusive in general. So perhaps maybe give them an inclusive hiring e-learning or training. So mapping that out to your maturity level is a really good thing to consider. And then beyond that, like I said, build in some nudges so that they don't just tick the box from the e-learning, but there's some follow-up conversations, follow-up trainings that they can attend, follow-up application trainings that they can attend to make it really rock solid. So for example, many of our clients who offer the inclusive hiring e-learning will then offer a half-day follow-up training opportunity, training workshop, virtually or in person, where they get to experience those interview situations through a simulation. And if you're training to become more inclusive in terms of your hiring interview practices, you go through that simulation with other people. So it also makes it a social learning experience, and you get feedback on how well you performed as an interviewer, which, let's be honest, hardly ever happens. When you're being told to interview people and hire people, no one ever gives you feedback on how effective you are with your interview skills. So it's a fantastic, very practical learning opportunity to build on the e-learning theory and tools that they've covered a few weeks or a few months before. And other examples of learning nudges that you can create, we've done this especially for some of our clients, is put inclusion experiments into the e-learning and then create some learning circles for people to have those follow-up conversations on their inclusion experiments. So the e-learning covers a topic, you're set the challenge to think of some inclusion experiments, so practical things that were presented in the e-learning that you can apply in your day-to-day from the very next day. People make a commitment, that's tracked into the learning management system. There's an automation to nudge them on that over the next few weeks. And then there are drop-in points for people who took part in that e-learning that particular month, and it invites them automatically to have a group conversation on the topic and the experiments that you committed to. And it provides some accountability, but also an opportunity to have, again, that social learning opportunity to see how other people are doing and what they've learned and where they failed and what they can do differently next time. So all of this to say is ways in which you can really build on e-learning. But remember, it's not a silver bullet. As I've said many times already, it needs to be complemented with other things in that learning journey. And it also needs to be supported by senior leadership, systemic policy change, and sometimes hard conversation when things are not going well. So don't just treat e-learning or training as the silver bullet. You have to have other actions in place around the organization to create sustainable change. So, does anyone have any questions on what I've covered so far, or anything to add? Please let me know. And if you'd like to learn more about some of the work that we do and some of the e-learnings that we offer, then do take the time to check out our website, thrivingtalent.solutions/e-learning. And there's a range of topics there that we provide content for our different clients and partners. And I'm just going to hang on another minute or two to see if there are any questions or feedback in the chat. I've spoken a lot and I want to make sure we've got time for other people to contribute here. I don't see anything so far. But if you did miss this LinkedIn Live as a live event, then the team will be packaging this up as a blog post and publishing that on our website. And also, we've recorded the session and you can watch this in your own time after today. If you have any questions on any of the topics I've covered so far, any of the practices, then please do get in touch. Myself and the team are ready to help you out with this topic. It's an important one, I think, especially as we go into the second half of the year. If you've got budget left that you need to spend and there's some objectives around diversity, equity, and inclusion, then this is the time to plan and think about how you're going to achieve that. And we're very, very happy to help you think those options through, and bring in the experiences and lessons learned from the different projects that we've worked on over the years. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you at the next LinkedIn Live.